to kind of give us that overview, the analysis, kind of what learnings there are from these two states. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him to get us started. From there, we'll then move over to CREC, the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness, who did more the broader national landscape of the TPM network. So Matt?
All right, thank you, Nikki. So, as Nikki said, my name is Matt Ledger. I'm a research analyst at the American Enterprise Institute. I'm very excited to be here today to discuss our research on TPM, which began back in June. This presentation is based on a report we're currently drafting, which is set to publish sometime in mid-November. My colleague at AEI who conducted this research with me, Jackson Garner, was unfortunately able to join us today, but the two of us are open to sharing our contact information for anyone who wants to reach out to us following the presentation. Next slide, please. So over the last several months, we've conducted a deep dive analysis of TPM outcomes in Michigan and Kentucky. We developed a survey with CERC that asks questions about the progress being made with TPM and the barriers or challenges with its continued operations. We then conducted several focus groups with each state, with groups made up of TPM champions, education and training partners, employers, and other involved parties. We then conducted a comprehensive qualitative and quantitative analysis of our findings between the survey and focus groups. And the following is what we found. Next slide, please. So we'll start with Michigan. So Michigan has been very active with TPM since its founding in 2014, and the state has ramped up its efforts significantly in the last couple of years. To learn more about their to learn more about their approach to TPM, we hosted 2 focus groups with a total of 14 representatives from TPM from across different regions of the state. We also had 25 survey responses as well. Next slide, please. So focus group participants were TPM champions, TPM steering committee members, workforce agency leaders and consultants, education providers, employers, and heads of industry associations. The employers that spoke with us represented several different industries and sectors, including auto manufacturing, energy, chemical manufacturing, healthcare, IT, and skilled trades. Most participants had at least some form of TPM Academy training dating back to the first cohort back in 2014. Next slide, please. Survey respondents were from workforce agencies, local chambers of commerce and business associations, economic development organizations, employers, and education institutions. 24 of the 25 respondents had attended a TPM Academy session, 95% of which did so in the last 3 years. The remaining was back in 2014. As shown in the figure to the right, nearly 78% of respondents have started or supported at least one employer collaborative since attending the TPM Academy. Next slide, please. So prior to the pandemic, TPM really began to take off in Michigan. Of the survey respondents who have formed at least one collaborative, the majority said that their most active collaboratives were formed in either 2019 or 2020. 2/3 of these respondents noted that at least one was still active as of February, right before the pandemic. Nearly a quarter had multiple collaboratives still active. Next slide, please. For the remaining active employer collaboratives, the industries represented include manufacturing, health sciences, IT, transportation and logistics, and architecture and construction, among a few others. Next slide, please. As shown in the figure here, nearly 2/3 of survey respondents noted that their active collaboratives are just in the early stages of the TPM process or are just building momentum. Just under half of respondents who formed at least one TPM collaborative have advanced their collaboratives beyond strategy 1 and are either currently working through or have surpassed the data collection and analysis strategies. Next slide, please. As a result of the efforts so far in Michigan, a number of training and/or education education programs have been created or adjusted to support skill supply needs of employers. The most common are apprenticeship programs, followed by secondary career and technical education programs and third-party certifications. Next slide, please. So while there have been great successes with the TPM model in Michigan, advancing the program forward has been met with several challenges. Survey respondents overwhelmingly identified employer engagement as the largest hurdle to overcome, followed by resource constraints and conflict with partners. But in order for us to understand the context for these challenges, we had to go directly to the source, and this is where our focus groups came in. Next slide, please. So first, in the survey, employer engagement was a challenge for nearly half of respondents. However, these challenges were echoed by nearly every focus group participant. For some employers, engagement issues stem from finding the time to commit to the process and sustain that commitment. In many instances, employers were very engaged and excited up front, but as time went on, the number of highly engaged employers began to dwindle. For others, it was a matter of overcoming the upfront skepticism of being in the same room and collaborating with competitors. In other cases, employers were simply struggling to see how TPM was different from other existing workforce development programs and ultimately disengaged. Second, resource constraints were also a barrier for a quarter of survey respondents, but nearly every focus group participant discussed resource challenges in some manner. While collaboratives have a designated project manager, there were several instances where PMs were stretched thin, responsible for covering multiple collaboratives or regions simultaneously, making it difficult to move things along quickly. Additionally, there were instances where a PM left their role, requiring the collaborative pause operations while a new one was hired, slowing momentum. Resource constraints were also an issue for employers because the TPM process took valuable productive time away from the company. Lastly, conflict with partners was not as pertinent a challenge with focus groups, but it was a barrier several expressed having to deal with. In particular, there was one notable differentiator between groups in terms of when and how they engaged training and education providers. In one instance, a collaborative engaged an education provider only after defining skill needs and conducting demand planning, but never looped them into what was happening with the collaborative until that stage. Once engaged, the education provider brought to light a number of issues that needed to be addressed, including the timing of curriculum development and credential requirements, among others. This created a stall point for the collaborative because they had to work backwards to realign their timelines with the education provider and address the school's resource constraints. In other instances, collaboratives struggled to rope in a number of post-secondary education providers because the school's plans for providing certain degree programs did not align with the mission of the collaboratives. Next slide, please. So in addition to the challenges, the conversation revealed a number of key techniques that helped collaboratives succeed. First, to make TPM more accessible to and sustainable for employers, several focus group members discussed efforts to simplify the process step by step as much as possible. By breaking down individual strategies into smaller, more digestible chunks, collaboratives are best able to maintain focus, prioritize salient tasks, and gain momentum. Focus group participants also discussed the need to move employers along in lockstep with one another and to take their time doing so. By taking this approach, successful collaborators were able to help employers feel less overwhelmed by the process, gain a sense of accomplishment, and also stay more engaged. Second, to prevent or minimize the risk of turning employers or partners off from the TPM process, successful collaboratives engage employers and partners early and often. In the case of employers, this emphasis on frequent engagement helped to clarify any confusion about the program and set clear expectations. In the case of education or training partners, engaging early and often gave partners insight into the types of skills needed, but they could also help the collaborative align timelines with theirs. And third, with the existence of other workforce development programs that include employer collaboratives, many TPM collaboratives in Michigan decided to build off these existing relationships rather than reinvent the wheel. For instance, several collaboratives leveraged a handful of employers that had trusting and productive relationships previously and could be used as a model to convey the value of TPM's collaboration model to skeptical employers. And now we'll move on to Kentucky. So Kentucky's been active with TPM since its inception. Kentucky is segmented into 5 TPM regions with a Kentucky Chamber of Commerce employee assigned to each one. Over the past couple of years, 25 active collaboratives have been established. We received 18 survey responses and conducted a focus group with 4 members of the TPM community. Next slide, please. This graph illustrates what type of organization survey respondents and focus group participants represented. Exactly half came from education organizations, with others representing a chamber of commerce, business, workforce board, or economic development organizations. Next slide, please. Most of the active collaboratives from survey responses were started in 2018 or 2019. About half of these completed strategies 2 through 4, which included demand planning, understanding credentialing and competencies, and analyzing talent flows. As we've heard throughout this study process, some people skipped around these steps depending on need. Additionally, 3/4 had pre-existing frameworks for employer collaboratives, which at least gave these folks a starting point when beginning their TPM journey. Next slide. As of February 2020, Kentucky had active collaboratives in manufacturing, transportation, business services, education and training, and the health sciences. Next slide. Here are some modifications to programs based on the great work from these collaboratives. We see some similarities to Michigan, including the creation of secondary and technical education programs, followed by apprenticeships, third-party certifications, and industry-recognized credentials. Next slide. Regarding the top challenges for Kentucky survey responses, employer engagement and resource constraints dominated Kentucky's responses, with political or public acceptance just receiving 4%. And we discussed these challenges with members of the TPM community in a focus group. Next slide. So we had 4 focus group participants. They included the CEO of an electric company, a workforce director at a technical school, a designated state TPM champion, and a workforce board employee. They each echoed the results of the survey, citing employee engagement and resource constraints as a leading barrier to success of TPM, and they offered similar issues within these challenges as Michigan, be it selling employers on the value of TPM or keeping employers consistently engaged. Another theme in what we're calling employee churn is also harmful to establishing and maintaining collaboratives. If there is only one enthusiastic TPM goal setter as part of the collaborative and that person leaves for another position, that usually slows down progress and leaves the collaborative stationary, and this happens several times to focus group members. This problem also creeps in when a point person leaves at a partner organization, be it an employer or a training provider. Next slide, please. So as mentioned earlier, Kentucky's been enthusiastic about TPM since the beginning. Some focus group participants started at various points along the curriculum, which shows how the flexibility of TPM curriculum can be beneficial. Just a quick caveat to that, one participant said that she had a small bit of regret not starting from the beginning because they could have identified an additional key job in the healthcare field and addressed that skill need. However, most participants agreed that flexibility was incredibly important for establishing and gaining momentum for the program. Finally, the focus group participants agreed that there were some things in their field that they couldn't change, be it a quick certification change or more tuition dollars at a community college, but they recognized this and identified concrete, tangible action items that when moving the program forward, rather than focusing on wish list items that could be more difficult to achieve. For example, the CEO of the electric company decided, he referenced his efforts to get local middle schools to include a class in their 8th grade curriculum that serves simply to teach kids about careers and opportunities in the field, which helped to garner interest among students earlier in their lives. And once he was able to accomplish that, he moved on to working with a few technical and vocational schools to develop programs in their schools before scaling their efforts any further. Next slide, please. So between Michigan and Kentucky, there was one common challenge and one key success factor discussed in the focus groups that really made a difference. The key common challenge was building and sustaining momentum. Nearly every focus group participant discussed having to grapple with getting all important stakeholders in the room at the same time just to kickstart the process, never mind to keep things going. And once engaged, everyone said that there was often a lot of excitement and activity up front, but as the program advanced into later stages and the work became more time and labor intensive for employers, activity often slowed down and led to disengagement. And the key common success factor was having an employer or a community champion. And what we mean by that is it was critical to have at least one highly respected and successful employer in the region or a high-level executive who was respected by their peers inside and outside of their industry that served as an advocate for the program. In other words, without someone that employers could look up to who believes in the success of the program, it was hard to sell other employers who were deciding whether or not to invest their time in this. With that, that's all we've got for the state results, and I yield my time.
Thanks, Matt. I'll get started with the NLN National Network Evaluation. Hopefully everyone's able to see my screen. Let me know if you aren't able to.
We can. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nikki. Hello, everyone. My name is Merab Hagos. I'm with the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness. I'm joined here today with my colleagues, Allison Forbes and Ken Poole. And we're going to discuss some of our preliminary findings for the National Network Evaluation. And, you know, CREC has been involved with doing this work with the U.S. Chamber for years, working to help cohorts grow and help people understand what exactly they're doing. But this is our first chance to look at the whole network. And we're currently in the process of doing our survey for the evaluation. This survey is still open. If you have this survey in your inbox, please get it to us as soon as possible. End of week would be great, but tomorrow would be even better. But in addition to the survey, we're also looking at the entire NLN TPM system, trying to get a better understanding of who's been involved in what, who's taken on what role, been a part of what activities, such as testing tools or attending the academy. And with this information, we're really trying to get a better sense of how do we kind of maintain the magic of the academy and how do we use this information to better inform our evaluation. We've been working with AEI. Thanks for your presentation, Matt. It provided a lot of context for us to understand what's going on in Kentucky and Michigan, and we're really glad to be here with you all here today. So a bit about our survey sample. We surveyed 350 members of the National Learning Network. This included TPM Academy graduates and other NLN participants. We've decided not to include Michigan and Kentucky, who had their own survey, and we just didn't want to double survey those individuals. And frankly, the state survey was a bit more detailed than this NLN survey. The NLN survey is 10 minutes long. It's roughly 26 questions, and it covers the topics of the your NLN activity, collaborative activity, and outcome measures. To date, we have 74 responses, and that's roughly 21% of the total survey. We got a good response from various cohorts. As you can see, over 50% of our responses come from cohorts within the last 2 years. And we did get a good response from those who participated in the pilot and in the first 3 cohorts. So we feel comfortable with this mix of individuals, but more participation on the survey would be greatly appreciated. We also got a number of responses for collaboratives, and our top 3 collaboratives are in manufacturing, health science, and architecture and construction. This graph shows NLN members and survey respondents by organization type. As you can see, educational organizations and chamber and business associations, the majority of the NLN network. They were also the majority of our survey responses, but we did hear a good sample from the Workforce Development Board. So interesting mix of people. So a bit about our preliminary survey results. We asked you all how well prepared you were to support employer collaboratives before the TPM Academy or engaging with the NLN and the NLN in general. And this is a self-reported score. We got an average of 32 points. And excitingly enough, we asked the same question, but after the TPM Academy or engaging with the NLN, and we saw that those percentage points or those points go up about over 40 points. So people feel more comfortable working with employers, and they're taking a lot of the Academy strategies and knowledge and framework to really inform the work that's going on the ground. So that's really exciting to see in our survey. Regarding collaborative activity, we were able to identify 40 host organizations, 140 collaboratives that are directly connected to the survey respondents. We found out we have over 1,200 employers that are engaged, that being an average of 32 employers per host organization. So that's across all collaboratives under one host organization, and an average of 9 employers per collaborative. To get a better sense of where these collaboratives are, about 78% of collaboratives identified are still active as of February 2020. We heard about 10% of collaboratives are still starting up in that early stage, trying to develop a collaborative and get that going. But the majority are in that doing that hard work, getting the data collection and analysis. That's roughly over 50% of our responses. But we also heard a good amount of people who are already working with their talent providers. So this was really exciting to see. People are moving along the strategies in the curriculum, so good to see. In regards to outcome measures, over 50% of host organizations report that collaboratives and employers are actively tracking outcome measures, and we were curious to see what are those measures that they're tracking. And the three most common metrics we saw were increased number of qualified job candidates, a reduced number of unfilled job openings, and reduced staff turnover and increased retention rates. As you can, and on the next slide, you'll see examples from the survey responses that show some of the open-ended questions we asked, which we wanted more specifics about the type of outcomes and outputs you all are collecting. And you can kind of see there's like a variety, like a varying level of detail. People are working to capture these outputs and outcomes, but maybe the numbers aren't coming in just yet. But for those who have joined our session before with the U.S. Chamber going over the logic model, these are these are basically the ROI pain points, employer pain points on the left, and some simple outputs on the right. And generally, we try to get a sense, we wanted to get a sense of how you participated in the NLN within the last year. Generally, folks join webinars and use online resources, but it seems like there's been pretty good engagement at the Talent Forward conference. So people are engaged, and it looks like people like to be connected with you all. And lastly, on this survey, we asked you to tell the Chamber what support you need moving forward. And here are some of the options that have come up. But we do want to take a minute for you all to use the chat option, the chat box, sorry, to select one of these options that you feel is one of these support options that you feel is most important to you, and it also important to the network moving forward. Just use the chat box, select one of the, sorry, looks like 6 options here, and I'll read them out loud as you put them into the chat box. This will be a quick poll for us to get a better sense of what is most important to you. The first being communication support, framing and messaging the work moving forward. Second is virtual consultations with TPM members regarding strategy. 3 is additional networking opportunities via online forums. 4, employer engagement strategies during COVID. 5, issue-specific problem solving with TPM network peers. And lastly, analytical or technical support. Like I said,